It started the second night after we moved in. I was unpacking boxes in the living room when I heard it. A faint whisper, muffled and soft, like someone trying to talk through a layer of plaster. At first I ignored it. Old houses have their quirks, right? The creaks, the groans, the hum of empty rooms. But as I reached for another box, I froze. Sarah, my name. It came from the wall to my left, clear enough to make my stomach drop. I stood there, clutching a stack of books, waiting for, I don't know, something. But there was only silence. The rest of the night was quiet, though I barely slept. I told myself I was imagining things, that the stress of moving was playing tricks on me. But the next day, as I unpacked in the kitchen, it happened again. This time, it wasn't just one voice. It was several, low, overlapping whispers that seemed to bleed through the walls themselves. I pressed my ear to the cold plaster, and what I heard made my skin crawl. She's back. She doesn't remember. She'll remember soon. The air in the room grew thick, almost suffocating. I staggered back, my breath hitching as the whispers faded into nothing. That night, I woke up at exactly 3:14 a.m. to a sound that I'll never forget. It was a scratching noise, frantic and sharp, coming from inside the walls right above my bed. My lamp flickered as the sound grew louder, more desperate. I stared, paralyzed, as the plaster started to crack. And then I heard it. Laughter. Low, childlike giggles echoing from every corner of the room. It was warped and distorted, like an old cassette tape being played at the wrong speed. My body finally reacted, and I bolted from the bed, slamming the door behind me. When I returned, the next morning, I found something I hadn't noticed before. The wallpaper above my bed had peeled back, revealing an old message carved into the wood underneath. We are still here. I wanted to leave immediately, but something wouldn't let me. I felt a pull to stay, to understand. That night, I stayed, up, pacing the house, trying to rationalize everything. That's when I found it. An old crawl space in the basement I hadn't noticed before. It was hidden behind a loose panel, its opening barely wide enough to squeeze through. Inside I found things that made my blood run cold. Children's toys covered in dust, tiny handprints smudged on the concrete walls, and a single photo, yellowed with age. It was a family, 2 parents, a little girl, and a doll she was clutching. I stared harder at the photo, my breath catching in my throat. The doll was the same one I had as a child. Suddenly, I felt hot breath on the back of my neck. A voice whispered, close enough to my ear to make me shudder. "Do you remember now?" I ran out of the house, leaving everything behind. The next morning, I contacted a moving company and didn't even wait for them to finish. The house is still there, still listed for sale. I've tried to convince myself it wasn't real, but sometimes, late at night, I hear it. The whispers, the laughter. And I wonder, how long has it been following me? We should have known something was wrong when the landlord gave us the key. She handed it over, pausing just long enough to make it awkward. "Oh, and one more thing," she said, her tone unusually sharp. "The basement door stays locked. Don't open it." My roommate and I exchanged glances, waiting for her to explain. But she didn't. She just turned on her heels and left without another word. At first, we didn't think much of it. The house was old, drafty, with a smell of damp wood and mildew. The kind of place that had character. But that door, it was different. The basement door was unlike the others in the house. Heavy, with iron hinges and a keyhole so old it looked rusted shut. Even just walking past it felt wrong, like the air around it was colder, thicker somehow. For weeks, I ignored it, but my roommate Sam wasn't as patient. A locked door in our own house? That's ridiculous, he said one night, standing in front of it with a crowbar. Maybe there's a reason, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Sam didn't listen. He forced the crowbar into the frame, and with one sharp push, the lock snapped. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. The smell hit us immediately, wet earth, mildew, and something sharper, metallic, like blood. Hell no, I muttered, stepping back. But Sam, of course, had to go down. It's probably just an old wine cellar, he said, his voice already echoing as he disappeared into the blackness. I waited at the top of the stairs, my pulse racing. I called out to him after a minute. No answer. Sam? Still nothing. And then, a sound. A low, guttural growl so deep it vibrated in my chest. My flashlight flickered, and I swear, just for a second, I saw something at the bottom of the stairs. Eyes. They glowed faintly, reflecting the light, but they weren't human. Too wide, too high off the ground. I slammed the door and locked it, my hands trembling as I leaned against the frame. That's when I heard it, scratching. It started softly but grew louder, more frantic, like claws raking against the wood. And then Sam's voice, muffled and desperate. "Let me out! It's in here with me!" I froze, my mind racing. I wanted to open the door, but I couldn't. Something in me knew. That wasn't Sam. The scratching stopped. The voice fell silent. The house was unnervingly quiet after that, but I didn't dare open the door. I moved out the next morning. A week later, I saw the house in the news. A family had moved in, ignoring the landlord's warnings. They opened the basement door. No one ever saw them again. The mirrors in the new house were strange. No matter how many times I cleaned them, they always looked dirty, streaked with smudges and fingerprints. At first I blamed my kids, but they swore it wasn't them. Then came the shadows. One night, I was brushing my teeth when I saw it, a flicker of movement in the bathroom mirror. A dark figure gliding past, just out of view. I spun around, my heart hammering, but the room behind me was empty. I laughed nervously, convincing myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. But when it happened again the next night, I knew it. Wasn't just my imagination. This time, I stared directly into the mirror, refusing to look away. As I brushed my hair, I noticed something off. My reflection wasn't perfectly synced with me. A half-second delay, so slight it was almost imperceptible. My stomach churned. I raised my right hand, and my reflection raised its left. I stepped back, my chest tightening. My reflection didn't move. It just stood there, staring at me, its head tilting slightly to the side. That night, I covered every mirror in the house. Bed sheets, towels, anything I could find. My kids thought I was losing it, and honestly, I was starting to believe them. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A week later, I forgot to cover the hallway mirror before going to bed. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Soft, deliberate steps, pacing back and forth. "Michael," I called out, thinking it was my son. The footsteps stopped. I got out of bed and cracked the door open. The hallway was dark, but I could see the mirror at the end of the hall. My breath caught in my throat. A man was standing there, tall and pale. his face twisted into an unnatural grin. He wasn't in the hallway. He was in the mirror. His head turned slowly toward me, his black eyes locking onto mine, and then he took a step forward, toward the glass. I slammed the door and locked it, shaking as I pressed my back against the wood. For hours, I listened to the silence, waiting for something, anything to happen. When the sun finally rose, I gathered my kids, and we left the house without a word. Later, I got a call from the new owners. The man asked me if anything weird had happened with the mirrors while we lived there. I hung up. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror in my new house, I catch a glimpse of him, just for a second. His grin wider than before. He's waiting. We were unpacking in the attic when we found it, a door we hadn't noticed before. It was small, tucked away in the farthest corner, almost hidden by the slanted beams. "That's weird," my partner said, crouching to examine it. "Why would they seal off a room like this?" The door was barely big enough for a child to crawl through. Its edges were warped, like it had been pried open and hastily nailed shut at some point. I wanted to ignore it, but my partner, Matt, had other plans. With a few solid tugs, the door creaked open, revealing a dark, windowless space. The air that spilled out was stale, thick with the smell of mildew and something sharp, metallic. Inside, the walls were covered in drawings, hundreds of them. They were crude, childlike scrolls, all done in black charcoal, stick figures standing in a line, their hollow eyes staring blankly ahead. Houses on fire, people with long, clawed hands reaching toward them. In the center of the room was a single object, a wooden box, small enough to fit in my lap, with a rusted latch holding it shut. I didn't want to touch it, but Matt, of course, was already prying it open. Inside was a notebook, its pages yellowed with age and filled with frantic, looping handwriting. The same phrase was scrawled over and over, growing larger and more. Desperate as the pages went on, it watches, it waits, it wants. A sudden thud made us both jump. It came from the wall to our left, like something heavy had just slammed against it. "Probably rats," Matt muttered, but his voice wavered. I stepped closer to the wall, drawn by an almost magnetic pull. When I pressed my ear to it, I swear I heard breathing. That night, we heard it again. The thuds, the scratching. It started in the attic and moved down the walls, louder and more, insistent as the hours passed. Around 3 a.m., we woke up to the sound of something dragging across the ceiling above our bed. Matt grabbed a flashlight, muttering about raccoons, but I couldn't move. I just lay there, frozen, listening to whatever was up there. When the noise stopped, I finally looked at the ceiling. My stomach twisted. There were deep, jagged gouges in the plaster, like claws had been raking across it. The next morning, we sealed the attic door with nails and duct tape, but it didn't stop. The noises grew worse, louder, angrier. The walls began to creak and groan, like they were under immense pressure. And then the drawings started appearing outside the room. At first, it was just faint smudges on the hallway, walls. But by the third night, the same stick figures with hollow eyes had spread to the living room, the bathroom mirror, even the inside of our closet. The final straw came when we woke up to find the message scrawled across the bedroom wall. In jagged black lines, "You shouldn't have opened it." We didn't pack. We didn't look back. We just left. Weeks later, I got a call from the landlord. She sounded shaken. "Did you find the room?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just hung up. Sometimes I wonder if we could have done something differently. But when I close my eyes at night, I still hear the scratching in the walls, growing louder, like it's following me. I still think about that room sometimes, about the drawings, the notebook, and whatever was breathing behind the walls. We left that house behind, but deep down, I know we didn't leave it alone. They say curiosity killed the cat, but in houses like that, it does worse. It follows you. If you enjoyed these stories and want more chilling tales like this, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss a new video, no matter what's waiting for you in the dark. And remember, some doors are better left closed. Good night.